I'm Peter Mandelson, former UK Cabinet Minister and First Secretary of State and European Union Trade Commissioner.
Interesting. Let's start with Brexit. And please explain the purpose of Open Britain and your role within the organisation.
Well, Open Britain has been organising those who want Britain to remain in the European Union, and I still do, even more so 3 years on from the referendum, because anything that is being negotiated now so clearly demonstrates what an inferior deal we're going to get compared to what we enjoy as members of the European Union. And I think many people feel like this. I'm not saying there's been an avalanche of support or change in opinion, but I think many more people in Britain realise now what we stand to lose from our membership of the European Union. I wish they'd realised that at the time of the referendum.
So what is Open Britain's stance on solving the Irish border dilemma? And I ask you that because, of course, you were also Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Well, I was Northern Ireland Secretary when we were implementing the Good Friday Agreement. It was negotiated and then there was a delay for a year. And I was Secretary of State when we were implementing it. And I've got absolutely no doubt at all that the last thing that Ireland needs is a return of any sort of hard border. It symbolises everything which has been a problem in Ireland's history. It symbolises the conflict between North and South. And of course, since the Good Friday Agreement, what you've seen is the emergence of an economy, a single economy, that embraces the whole of the island of Ireland. The free movement of goods and services and people and others going to school and college. It's been a huge source of prosperity and growth for Ireland, and nobody wants to reverse that, especially given the way in which it would probably be exploited by political extremists who, of course, want to make a fight over the border all over again.
Okay, and as a proponent of free trade, I mean, you were European Commissioner Trade for a time, and you will have seen on the news here for the past 6 months this yellow vest movement. One of their major complaints really is that globalisation just isn't working for the common man or woman. So, I mean, what do you make of what's happening here in France and in other places, this kind of push against globalisation?
Well, if by globalisation you mean greater trade between nations and greater flows of investment, of people, and people buying each other's goods and services, and therefore creating jobs and raising people's standards of living in all the countries that are benefiting from it, then, I'm in favour of globalisation. But we do have to understand that it does involve change. When you sort of open your markets and when you free up trade, there are losers as well as winners. And the problem, in my view, about free trade, and I support it, is that we have been, in many cases, much better at growing trade than we have in helping and protecting those who in the short term are casualties of change. It's the same when it comes to technology change. These great shifts between countries and within countries, people need to be supported. They need help in order to make adjustments. And that's why I've always said that a liberal economic policy needs to operate within a framework of social democratic intervention and support for people. I think that because my politics are of the centre left. But I'm absolutely sure that that the economics has worked in the main in growing prosperity and raising living standards, but I don't think that politics has always worked in the same way in dividing up the cake and making sure that the benefits of globalisation are distributed as evenly and fairly as they should be.
Interesting. So you blame politics rather than economics, actually.
Yes, I do. I think that the politicians have failed rather than those who operate the economies.
Okay, interesting. Now, it's election season, this time European elections. So how do you see these upcoming European elections playing out in Britain in light of Brexit?
Oh, I'm afraid that in Britain the European elections are not probably going to be supported by the majority of people. People don't see the point. They believe that having voted to leave the European Union, we shouldn't be sending members of the European Parliament. Many people will use the election as an opportunity to protest about whatever they want to protest about. That's absolutely right and proper in a democracy, but it may have absolutely nothing to do with the European issues at stake. And I think it will create a lot of confusion for people in the rest of Europe who themselves will say, well, you know, you voted to leave and yet you're sending these members of the European Parliament. Please don't send people who are simply going to sort of try and wreck what we're doing or sabotage the work of the Parliament. And I very much hope that, you know, amongst those who are elected as a result of these elections, they won't be going to Brussels or Strasbourg with the intention of sabotaging the effective working of that Parliament. It would pile insult on top of injury if Britain were to do that to the European Union. I hope it doesn't even occur to people.
Good. Now, talking about the Labour Party, that you're of course a member of, you told the BBC in 2015 that Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader made the party essentially unelectable. Do you still hold that view? And I have to also stress that you did say at the same time, give him a chance. But, you know, what's your view now on Labour leadership?
I can only judge and be guided by the opinion polls. The support for Labour is very high. The support for him personally is very low. So, as leader of the Labour Party, he is pulling down Labour's polling performance. He is making us less electable than we would otherwise be. That's a straight arithmetical fact.
And what to do then?
Well, I wish he would be a more effective leader, to be honest. He always gives the impression to people that he's sort of semi-detached, or put it a different way, he's sort of semi-engaged. He's not a very effective or fiery leader of the opposition. He doesn't really lay a glove on the Tories, which is extraordinary because they are in complete disarray themselves and falling apart as a party. I wish he were a more effective campaigner for what he believes in. That's my main criticism of him, not what he believes in, but that he doesn't campaign for what he believes in better than frankly we've seen since he became in the role.
Interesting. Okay. Now you are here in Paris for this peace conference, so let's talk peace. What are your objectives, or what are the objectives actually of the peace conference here? Just explain that to our listeners.
I think the purpose of coming together in this way is to restate and reaffirm our commitment to international cooperation and collaboration, to the multilateral system as it has been created in the post-war era, which is really at the heart of the peace that we've created in Europe and in other parts of the world since 1945, the prosperity that we've driven, the effective action we've taken to help developing countries that are poorer than ourselves around the world, the way in which the World Bank, for example, has worked to the benefit of so many people, and the way in which a rules-based trading system has given opportunities for all, not just the sort of big, trading players, but everyone who wants to benefit from international trade. They benefit from the strengthening of that rules-based system, and that's what countries working together have created, and I want to see more of that not less. But I definitely see challenges to the multilateral system, and what we've got to do, those of us who believe in it, is work together in order to defend it against its enemies, but also to enable it to change and adapt to the 21st century, which is what I would also like to see.
And it's interesting because you spoke about, of course, rich nations, Europe, the fact that there's pretty much been peace in Europe consistently since 1945. But can there really be peace when several countries in this world, including Britain, France, the United States, rely in part on the industrial military complex to fuel their economies?
Well, it depends what you mean by the industrial military complex. If you mean investment in the armaments that we need in order to defend ourselves against attackers, then certainly we need that. If you mean armaments that, for example, enable us to deploy peacekeeping forces in other continents, yes, I agree with that.
I mean the former.
Well, I think both things are important. We both have to secure ourselves, but also to intervene to reduce civil and armed conflict in other regions and continents in the world. This is important, and to do so effectively, you have to be armed.